Hi everyone, I've got a lot to share with you this week, including some new tree designs, a new feature for storage buildings, and the beginnings of the game's letters system. Before that, I've gone and set up a Patreon, so if you're interested in that, the link is in the description. Right, so speaking of Patreon, I decided to design some new trees to use as the tier artworks. At first, I thought I wanted a cherry tree, as the pine, maple, cherry colour gradient seemed like a good idea. It turns out though, that I'm not sure how cherry trees would work in the game's art style, and the attempt I made just wasn't up to standard. I went back, tried to add some denser foliage, but just couldn't get a design I liked, so I scrapped the whole idea. Next I tried an oak tree, a bit more standard, and I thought it would suit the game's style a bit better. I initially went for quite smooth shading, which again didn't look right, so I decided the way I shade maple trees would probably look best. I made the tree's shape primarily out of circles, then divided the resulting shape into stripes of colour. I'm pretty happy with how that design worked out, and I decided to design something a little special looking for the highest Patreon tier. At the moment, this tree species is unnamed, and it took a little while to come up with a look that appealed to me. I ended up with this curvy looking tree with purplish cloud foliage, which I think could look pretty cool in the game. If you have any ideas of what I should call this tree and whether there is something special it should do, let me know in the comments. Obviously all of these will hopefully end up in the game, but this is what they look like for now on Patreon. Right, so next I moved on to the emotion system with even more pixel art. Employees will have emotions and personality types, with little bubbles over their head popping up whenever their emotion changes. I drew a bunch of the most important ones in a sprite. The final set looked like this, with a range from happy to angry, a love heart for appreciation, and a sleepiness indicator. I got them into Unity, and this is how they look over employees' heads. It looks okay, but I could definitely get away with making them a lot bigger. I also think the bubbles themselves should match the brown colour of the rest of the interface, as the white really sticks out at the moment. At that point, I lost a bit of motivation for that particular feature, which I'll be coming back to in a later video. It just didn't seem all that necessary at this point in development, but will be necessary soon. I decided that next I should tackle a smaller feature that's nonetheless still very important. Tooltips for hovering over certain interface elements. These will just give a little explanation of what you're hovering over, and in this case, the name of the object you're hovering over in a storage building. I got that following the mouse, which is pretty much just a single line of code. I then went on to write code to trigger the tooltip, or disable the tooltip depending on whether the mouse has entered or exited an object. I then set all of that up in the storage inventory menu, which is pretty much just a drag and drop feature in Unity, adding mouse events for enter and exit. Here you can see that working as I hover over an inventory item, but for some reason it's not respecting the boundary of the object, and there's a considerable area outside of the object that it stays active in. It turned out that the area covered by the log sprite is actually a lot larger than the container itself. I fixed that problem by adding a mask over the sprite. This just trims the edges of the log sprite to only be within the boundary of the container. I honestly wasn't sure if that would work, but it turned out to work wonderfully, with the tooltip only appearing as I hover over the object. I then just made some small tweaks to the design to make it match the rest of the game's interface. This is how it looks. I like how the edge always contrasts with the interface due to the outline. Following on from that, I next began work on the ability to drag and drop items between storage buildings. Sounds simple, but it was a pain to implement. A lot of the steps to this were quite similar to the tooltip, so I'll spare the details, but this is how the finished feature worked. Just click on an object in the inventory interface and drag it to another storage building. It'll then be automatically transferred to the other building. This will be really helpful if you've forgotten to let your lumberjacks know which storage building you want them to deposit to. As always, I needed a break, and it's looking super Christmassy in Sheffield now, so I went for a walk through the Christmas market on a cold day to look at the stalls. I ended up in a record shop and picked a couple of albums up too, which has quickly become an addictive habit. I also ended up in the Peak District that weekend in a field with some sheep, so that was fun too. I did, of course, have to get back to work on the game after that, because I've now got a deadline I've set for myself and a roadmap to get this game done. The first thing on that roadmap is to get a letters system into the game. For those that tuned into my first live stream, you'll know what this is, but for those that don't, you'll receive letters throughout the game. These can come from companies, the bank, and other places in the game to give you some information, rewards, trade offers, etc. I spent the stream drawing and animating an envelope that letters will come out of. Thanks to everyone who watched the first stream, by the way. It went way better than I expected, and there were a lot more of you than I was hoping for. For this envelope, an improvement on the one I made in the stream, I decided to show the front of it, which has a stamp and will also be addressed to the player, which Unity is going to generate. I'm really pleased with how the stamp turned out, and I think that's my favourite part of the drawing. I then added a wax seal as a finishing touch. Next, I animated the envelope opening. The back of the envelope flips up for the letter to slide out. I made a few adjustments to the design, making the outline a little thinner and the colour a bit closer to white. With the animation and drawing done, I then got that animation into Unity. At that stage, it looked alright with the letter coming out correctly. Of course, the constant looping will be addressed in a minute. I then animated the envelope leaving the screen. With those basic steps done, I made a horrible looking test letter just to see if everything was working correctly. For those who are interested, the letter animation is only applied to a mask, with the actual letter underneath it. This ensures the letter isn't shown squashed as it resizes, instead looking like it's emerging from the envelope. The final step was to draw the letter. I added some dithered shading to the top and bottom of the letter, and I'm super happy with the result. I've looped it here so it's easier for you to see what's happening. Here you can see a bit more closely how the letter is masked, appearing to come out of thin air. The game is available for wishlisting on Steam, so if you want it when it comes out, follow the link in the description. These are the top patrons for this video. Thank you very much to each of you. That's all for this week. If you liked the video, do subscribe. I make loads of videos like this and will hopefully be doing live streams regularly from now on. Cheers for watching.